You will marry the Duke of Blackmere tomorrow, and you will not embarrass this family by pretending you have a choice." The words fell across the Ashcombe dining hall before every person who mattered in the county. Evelyn Ashcombe stood beside the long table, with her hands folded tightly, listening as her stepmother, Lady Euphemia, announced the arrangement as though she were discussing the sale of a horse rather than the future of a young woman. The candles trembled in their silver holders. Rain struck the tall windows. Around her, guests who had come for supper lowered their eyes for only a moment before amusement returned to their faces. A few laughed softly. Not because the situation was amusing, because Evelyn was the only person in the room who had lost something. Lady Euphemia lifted a small envelope from the table and placed it beside the untouched plate in front of Evelyn. The seal of the Duke of Blackmere was pressed into the dark wax. "You should be grateful," her stepmother continued. "Many women would consider such an offer a blessing." Evelyn looked at the letter but did not reach for it. The Duke of Blackmere was known throughout England as the coldest duke of his generation. He was a man whose estate was vast, whose reputation was spotless, and whose household was said to operate with the silence of a monastery. He attended Parliament when required, managed his lands without mercy, and avoided every social gathering where laughter might be expected. No one knew him as a husband, only as a man who never allowed anyone close enough to disappoint him. Lady Euphemia smiled. "You have spent 3 years proving you are difficult to place. No respectable gentleman wished to marry a woman who questioned every decision made around her. Now someone has offered you a title, and you still stand there looking unhappy." The room went quiet. Evelyn felt every eye upon her, but she did not lower her head. She had learned that silence was often mistaken for weakness. Her father had taught her that lesson before his death. He had shown kindness in private and obedience in public. When Lady Euphemia began controlling the household accounts after his passing, he had watched from his sickbed and said nothing. He had chosen peace over protection, and Evelyn had paid the price. Lord Ashcombe's relatives had taken control of the estate within weeks. Her inheritance had become a matter of discussion rather than a right. Her father's papers disappeared into locked rooms. Her requests for explanations were answered with reminders that unmarried daughters were expected to accept the decisions of their families. The final humiliation came when Lady Euphemia announced that the Duke of Blackmere had agreed to marry her, not because he had sought Evelyn, not because he knew her, because the arrangement solved 2 problems. Blackmere needed a wife with an acceptable family name. Ashcombe needed the financial connection. Evelyn understood then that she was not being offered a future. She was being transferred. A young cousin at the table covered a laugh with his hand. Evelyn turned toward Lady Euphemia. "And what exactly did the Duke receive in exchange for this generosity?" The question caused several guests to stop smiling. Lady Euphemia's expression hardened. "You would do well to remember your position." "My position," Evelyn replied calmly, "appears to be the one everyone has decided for me." A servant near the doorway quickly looked away. The guests did the same, because everyone in that room understood the danger of a woman speaking plainly. Lady Euphemia stepped closer. "You have always mistaken pride for courage." Perhaps, Evelyn said, because too many people have mistaken obedience for virtue. No one moved. The laughter vanished. The room became still. And in that silence, Evelyn realized something important. She was no longer afraid of losing what they had already taken. The letter from Blackmere remained unopened on the table. Evelyn did not yet know that inside it was a detail about the Duke's household that would change everything. She did not know that the marriage everyone believed would destroy her would become the beginning of a truth powerful enough to shake an entire family. Before we return to the beginning of Evelyn Ashcombe's journey, tell us where you are listening from today. If you enjoy stories of courage, injustice, and forgotten voices finding their way back to dignity, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you never miss a new tale. Your support helps this channel continue sharing these stories with listeners who believe every person deserves to be heard. Now, let us return to the moment when Evelyn's life began to change. Evelyn had not always been a woman who questioned the world around her. At Ashcombe Manor before her father's death, she had known a quieter kind of life. It was not luxurious, but it was stable. She spent mornings reviewing estate letters with her father, afternoons walking through the gardens, and evenings reading beside the library fire. She had never been the daughter who demanded attention. She had been the daughter who noticed what others ignored. She remembered which tenant families struggled after poor harvests. She knew which servants had worked at Ashcombe for decades. She understood the value of every pound spent because her father had once told her that an estate was not measured only by its land, but by the lives connected to it. After his death, those beliefs became inconvenient. Lady Euphemia preferred numbers without names. She reduced household expenses by removing long-standing servants. She changed suppliers. She delayed payments to workers who had no power to challenge her. When Evelyn questioned the decisions, she was told that emotions had no place in managing property. But Evelyn had noticed something else. Money was leaving Ashcombe Manor. Not through ordinary expenses, through carefully hidden transfers. The first clue appeared 3 months after her father's funeral. While searching for a family recipe book in an old cabinet, she found a small locked box pushed behind several unused linens. The box belonged to her father. She recognized the initials carved into the wood, E.A. Inside there might have been letters, accounts, or instructions, but the key was missing. When she asked the household steward, Mr. Holloway, he became unusually quiet. The old man had served the Ashcombe family for more than 30 years. His hands shook slightly when he arranged the silverware each morning, but his memory remained sharp. There are matters best left buried, he told her. Evelyn had looked at him carefully. Are they buried because they are forgotten, or because someone wishes they would remain hidden? Mr. Holloway did not answer. That silence stayed with her, because Evelyn had learned that people often revealed more by refusing to speak than by speaking. The Duke of Blackmere's proposal arrived soon afterward. His name was Lord Adrian Valenkrest, Duke of Blackmere, a man who inherited one of the largest estates in England after his father's passing. Rumours followed him everywhere. Some said he had no heart. Others said he simply had no patience for foolishness. He had refused several arranged marriages before, which made Evelyn wonder why he accepted this one. There had to be a reason. Lady Euphemia claimed it was because Blackmere respected the Ashcombe name. Evelyn did not believe her. The night before she was expected to leave for Blackmere Manor, she entered her father's old library for the first time since his death. The room smelled of dust leather and cold ashes. The servants had been instructed not to enter unless Lady Euphemia required something. It was as though the room itself had become another locked door. Evelyn searched the desk drawers carefully. Nothing. She examined the shelves. Nothing. Then she noticed one book placed incorrectly among the others, a collection of legal writings. It was slightly forward from the rest. Behind it she found a narrow space in the wooden panel. Her heart began beating faster. Inside was a folded piece of paper. Not a letter, not a will, only a name. And beneath it one sentence written in her father's hand. Trust no agreement that was made after my illness began. Evelyn read it twice, then a third time. The meaning settled slowly. Her father had known something was wrong. Someone had made decisions while he was unable to protect his own affairs. Someone had used his silence. A sound came from the hallway. Evelyn quickly folded the paper and stepped away from the desk. The door opened slightly. Lady Euphemia stood there. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Then Lady Euphemia looked at the paper in Evelyn's hand. What have you found? Evelyn placed the paper inside her glove. Nothing that concerns you. The expression on her stepmother's face changed. Not anger, fear, only for a moment. But Evelyn saw it, and for the first time since her father's death, she understood that Lady Euphemia was not simply trying to remove her from Ashcombe Manor. She was trying to make certain Evelyn left before she discovered why. The next morning Evelyn departed through the same entrance where she had once welcomed guests as the daughter of the house. This time she left as a woman being sent away. The carriage wheels moved over the wet road. The manor disappeared behind the grey curtain of rain. But Evelyn did not feel defeated. Not entirely. For the first time in her life, she was travelling toward a place where no one knew what she had been told to become. And perhaps that was the first freedom she had ever been given. She had not yet met the Duke of Blackmere. She had not yet discovered the rule every bride before her had obeyed. And she had no idea that breaking it would force the coldest man in England to finally reveal what he had spent years hiding. The first thing Evelyn noticed about Blackmere Manor was not its size, it was its silence. The carriage passed beneath the stone archway as rain fell steadily over the dark fields surrounding the estate. The towers of the manor rose above the trees severe, and unmoving their windows, glowing faintly with candlelight. Ashcombe Manor had felt like a place where people once lived, and then forgot how to speak. Blackmere felt different. It felt like a place where speaking had never been permitted at all. The carriage stopped before the entrance. A line of servants waited beneath the covered doorway. None smiled, none whispered, none moved until the carriage door opened. Evelyn stepped down carefully, holding the edge of her travelling cloak as the cold wind passed through the courtyard. She had expected arrogance from the Duke of Blackmere. She had not expected this. A household arranged like a military operation, every servant standing in a precise position, every curtain perfectly drawn, every movement controlled. The butler, Mr. Whitmore, approached and bowed. "Your Grace regrets that he cannot receive you immediately. He has been delayed in his study." Evelyn looked toward the tall windows of the manor. Delayed. Not absent, not unavailable. Delayed. It was a carefully chosen word. She understood then that even the servants had learned how to speak without revealing anything. That evening, Evelyn was shown to her rooms. They were larger than any chamber she had occupied at Ashcombe. There was a fireplace already burning. Fresh linens covered the bed. A small table held a vase of winter roses. The kindness should have comforted her. Instead, it made her cautious. Because kindness from strangers was easier to accept than kindness from people who had something to gain. A maid named Clara entered with a tray of tea. Her hands were young, but her expression carried the careful restraint of someone who had worked in a house where mistakes were expensive. Will her Grace require anything else? Evelyn almost corrected the title. She was not yet a duchess. But she noticed something. The servants were already treating her as though the marriage had transformed her, as though a ceremony could erase every uncertainty that came before it. "No, thank you," Evelyn said. The maid hesitated. Then she lowered her voice. "May I offer one piece of advice, my lady?" Evelyn looked at her. "Please do." Clara glanced toward the closed door. "Do not ask His Grace about the East Wing." The warning was so unexpected that Evelyn remained silent. "Why?" The maid immediately stepped back. "I should not have said anything. That was not an answer." "No, my lady, it was not." The girl left before Evelyn could ask more. Evelyn stood beside the fire, thinking about the words. The East Wing, another locked door, another hidden place, another silence. And Evelyn had begun to recognize a pattern. Where people insisted she should not look, there was usually something worth finding. The following morning she met the Duke of Blackmere. The meeting occurred in the library. Of course it did. A room filled with books, locked cabinets and secrets. Lord Adrian Valencrest stood beside the fireplace when she entered. He was not as old as she had imagined. Perhaps 32, tall, composed with dark hair, and an expression that gave away almost nothing. The rumors had described him as cruel. Evelyn saw something else. Exhaustion, not weakness, not sadness, but the exhaustion of a man who had spent years carrying responsibility alone. He turned as she entered. "Lady Evelyn, Your Grace." A silence followed. Not uncomfortable, measured. Evelyn realized immediately that this was a man who used silence deliberately. Most people feared quiet because they did not know what to do with it. The Duke seemed to use it as a shield. "I assume your journey was satisfactory," he said. It was long, a practical answer. His eyes moved slightly, as though he had expected something different. Perhaps a complaint, perhaps gratitude. "You are aware of the terms of our arrangement?" "Yes." "And you accept them?" Evelyn looked directly at him. "I was informed that acceptance was not required." Something changed in his expression. Only slightly, but enough. The Duke had expected a frightened bride, not an honest one. "You are unusually direct. I have been told that before. Usually as criticism. Usually." A faint movement appeared at the corner of his mouth. Not a smile. Something close enough to prove he was capable of one. The Duke turned toward the desk. "There is one rule in this household." Evelyn waited. "You will not enter my private study." She glanced toward the locked door behind him. "The room where you keep your papers?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because I said so." The answer was cold, Not angry, not cruel. Simply final. Evelyn studied him. Most women in her position would have lowered their heads. They would have promised obedience. They would have accepted the rule because their survival depended on pleasing him. But Evelyn had spent years watching rules used as weapons. She knew the difference between a boundary and a trap. Is there a reason I should trust this rule? The Duke looked at her. No. The honesty surprised her. No, no. Then why should I obey it? For the first time, the coldness in his expression disappeared. Because every person who ignored that rule regretted it. The answer should have frightened her. Instead, it made her curious. A man could demand obedience because he was arrogant, or because he was hiding something. Evelyn had already lived through one household built on hidden things. She had no intention of entering another blindly. That evening, the wedding ceremony took place in the private chapel at Blackmere. There were no grand celebrations, no musicians, no crowded ballroom. Only a small gathering of family representatives and household members. The arrangement was practical, almost businesslike. As the vows were spoken, Evelyn noticed something unusual. The Duke never looked pleased, but he never looked careless either. He treated the ceremony with complete seriousness. Afterward, as they returned to the manor, Evelyn saw the east wing again. A corridor leading away from the main hall, a locked door, and beside it a portrait covered with dark fabric. She stopped. The Duke noticed. You should not concern yourself with that part of the house. There was the rule again. Always the rule. Evelyn looked at him. I have discovered that people rarely warn me about things that do not matter. The Duke's expression hardened. You are not at Ashcombe anymore. No. She looked around the grand hallway. I am not. And perhaps that is why I will ask questions here. The servants nearby became very still. No one spoke to the Duke of Blackmere that way. No bride had ever done so. The Duke stared at her for several seconds. Then he turned away. You will find that curiosity has consequences. Evelyn watched him walk down the corridor. She should have felt defeated. Instead, she felt something she had not felt in years. Control, not because she had won, but because she had finally stopped pretending that obedience would protect her. That night, Evelyn opened her traveling case and removed the hidden paper from her glove. Her father's handwriting looked different in the candlelight, more urgent, more afraid. Trust no agreement that was made after my illness began. She placed the paper beside the sealed letter she had received from Blackmere. 2 secrets, 2 houses, 2 powerful men connected by silence. Then she noticed something. The seal on the Duke's letter had been broken before it reached Ashcombe. Someone else had read it first. Evelyn sat perfectly still, because suddenly the marriage arrangement no longer seemed like a simple agreement between 2 families. Someone had been controlling information before she ever arrived. And if that person had been watching Blackmere as closely as they had watched Ashcombe, then Evelyn was not the only one entering this marriage with something to lose. The next morning she would discover why every previous bride had followed the Duke's one command without question, and why breaking that rule might be the only way to uncover the truth. The following morning, Evelyn did not begin with confrontation. She began with observation. She noticed that the servants avoided looking toward the east corridor. She noticed that Mr. Whitmore changed the subject whenever the sealed study was mentioned. She noticed that even Clara, who had warned her the night before, seemed frightened by her own honesty. It was not fear of the Duke alone. It was fear of what might happen if the wrong person learned the truth. While walking through the lower hall, Evelyn saw an elderly servant carrying a stack of household records toward the archive room. One ledger slipped from his hands and fell open on the floor. For only a moment, Evelyn saw the page, Blackmere estate accounts. But beneath the official entries was a smaller, handwritten note, a name, Ashcombe. The servant quickly closed the ledger. My apologies, my lady. Evelyn looked at him carefully. You know my family name appears in those accounts. The old servant lowered his eyes. I know many things appear in those accounts, my lady. That answer was not a denial. And Evelyn understood that she had found the first person at Blackmere who was afraid because he knew something, not because he suspected something. Before she could ask more, footsteps sounded from the corridor. The servant immediately took the ledger away. The Duke stood at the far end of the hall. His expression gave nothing away, but his eyes moved from Evelyn to the disappearing ledger. and for the first time she saw something beneath his cold composure. Concern, not for himself, for what she had almost discovered. Neither of them spoke. The distance between them seemed filled with questions. Neither was ready to ask. Then the Duke quietly said that some truths were dangerous before they were understood. Evelyn replied that hidden truths were usually dangerous only to the people who had hidden them. The Duke looked at her for a long moment, and this time he did not order her away. He simply walked past her toward the locked rooms of Blackmere Manor, leaving Evelyn with the certainty that the rule he had given her was not protecting a secret. It was protecting someone from finding it. Evelyn did not follow the Duke, not because she had lost interest, because she had learned that a person who guarded a door too carefully was often waiting for someone to push against it, and Evelyn had no intention of revealing her next move. Instead, she returned to the library. It was the one room in Blackmere where information seemed more likely to survive. The shelves contained generations of family records, legal volumes, and estate documents. The room was not forbidden, which meant Evelyn thought that whatever mattered was probably somewhere else. She examined the desk near the window and noticed a small stack of correspondence waiting to be sorted. Most letters were ordinary: requests from tenants, invoices from suppliers, invitations from neighboring families. Then she found one envelope placed beneath the others. It was old. The paper had yellowed slightly. There was no seal, only a name written across the front: Lady Evelyn Ashcombe. Her breath caught. No one at Blackmere should have possessed a letter addressed to her, not one from before she arrived. She opened it carefully. Inside was a single page. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear. Your father did not intend to leave you without protection. The agreement that removed your rights was never meant to stand. Find the record kept by the person who witnessed his final decisions. Evelyn read the sentence again. The person who witnessed his final decisions. A witness. Someone who knew what happened before her father died. Someone who had been silent. She folded the letter and placed it inside her sleeve just as the library door opened. Mr. Whitmore entered. The old butler stopped immediately when he saw her expression. You have found something. It was not a question. Evelyn looked at him. You knew my father. Yes, my lady. You knew about the changes made after his illness. The butler remained silent, and that silence answered her. Evelyn stepped closer. I do not need every answer today, but I need to know whether my father was betrayed. Mr. Whitmore looked toward the window. Outside, the rain continued falling over Blackmere's fields. Finally he spoke. Your father was a man who trusted too easily. That is not an answer, no. The old servant looked back at her. It is a warning. Before your marriage was arranged, there were discussions between Ashcombe and Blackmere that you were never meant to hear. Evelyn felt the room become colder. Discussions between my family and the Duke, yes. Why? Mr. Whitmore hesitated. Because your father believed the Duke of Blackmere was the only man powerful enough to stop what was happening. Evelyn stared at him. That made no sense. The Duke was the man she had been sent to marry. The man her stepmother described as a convenient solution. The man everyone believed had taken advantage of Ashcombe's weakness. Unless that was not the truth. Unless someone had arranged for her to believe it. Before Mr. Whitmore could continue, a sound came from the hallway. A voice. Lady Euphemia Ashcombe. Evelyn froze. Her stepmother stood outside the library door, dressed in dark traveling clothes. Her expression composed, but her eyes sharp. She had arrived at Blackmere without warning, and she was not looking at Evelyn like a concerned relative. She was looking at her like someone who had discovered a problem that needed to be controlled. My dear Evelyn, Lady Euphemia said softly, I see marriage has already encouraged you to become curious. The library fell silent, because Evelyn understood then that her stepmother had not come to welcome her. She had come because something inside Blackmere was beginning to move, and whatever secret connected the two families, Lady Euphemia was afraid Evelyn was getting too close to it. Lady Euphemia entered the library as though she still belonged to every room she entered. That was the first thing Evelyn noticed. Not the expensive fabric of her traveling gown, not the confidence in her posture, not even the faint smile that never reached her eyes. It was the certainty. The certainty of a woman who had spent years believing that doors would open for her because other people had always stepped aside. Evelyn remained standing beside the desk. "I did not expect you at Blackmere." Lady Euphemia removed her gloves slowly. "Nor did I expect you to begin searching through private matters within days of your arrival." The accusation was carefully spoken, not loud, not emotional, designed to make Evelyn appear reckless. But Evelyn had learned that people often accused others of the very thing they feared. "I was reading in the library." "Were you?" Lady Euphemia's eyes moved briefly toward Mr. Whitmore. The old servant immediately understood the command hidden inside that glance. "Leave." But he did not move, and Evelyn noticed. For the first time, someone at Blackmere chose not to obey Lady Euphemia, the smallest act, but a meaningful one. "My lady," Mr. Whitmore said quietly, "the library is open to the Duchess of Blackmere." Lady Euphemia's expression changed, only slightly, but Evelyn saw it. She was not used to being challenged by servants, not even politely. "Very well," Lady Euphemia replied. "Then perhaps I should speak plainly." She turned toward Evelyn. "You believe there is some great injustice hidden behind your father's affairs. You believe someone has stolen something from you." Evelyn said nothing, because Lady Euphemia had just confirmed something without meaning to. She knew exactly what Evelyn was searching for. "You knew my father's affairs were altered." The question was calm. The effect was immediate. Lady Euphemia looked away for the briefest moment. A mistake, a small one, but enough. People who had nothing to hide usually defended themselves first. People who had something to hide searched for another answer. "Your father was ill," Lady Euphemia said. "Ill men make poor decisions." Evelyn felt the old anger rise, but this time she did not let it control her. No. She looked directly at her stepmother. "Ill men are also easier to manipulate." The room became silent. Mr. Whitmore lowered his eyes. Lady Euphemia's face hardened. "You have become bold." "No," Evelyn replied. "I have become tired." For years she had been told that patience was a virtue, that quiet women were respected, that a daughter who questioned her family created difficulty. But she finally understood. Patience was only praised when it benefited the person causing the harm. Lady Euphemia stepped closer. "Do not mistake your position here. A title does not erase where you came from." Evelyn looked at her. "And a title does not erase what was done before it was given." For a moment, Lady Euphemia had no answer. Then she turned and left the library. But as the door closed behind her, Evelyn noticed something on the floor. A small piece of folded paper. It had fallen from Lady Euphemia's glove. Evelyn waited until the footsteps disappeared. Then she picked it up. The paper contained only a few words. "Meet me at the East Wing. Tonight." No signature, no explanation, only a time. The message should have been alarming. Instead, Evelyn felt certain of one thing. Someone inside Blackmere wanted her to find the truth. The question was whether they wanted to help her uncover it, or whether they wanted to lead her into a trap. That night, Evelyn did not go immediately. She waited. She watched the servants move through the halls. She observed which corridors were used and which were avoided. She noticed that the East Wing had no ordinary traffic, no cleaning, no deliveries, no footsteps. A forgotten part of a living house. Near midnight, she finally stepped into the corridor. The candle in her hand flickered as the cold air moved through the passage. The door at the end stood locked. The same door the Duke had forbidden her to approach. Evelyn reached it and stopped. For years, others had decided what she could know. Her father's papers, her inheritance, her own future. She had accepted enough locked doors. She placed her hand on the handle. The door opened, not because she forced it, because someone on the other side had unlocked it first. Inside was not a room filled with treasures. It was a small office. Dust covered the furniture. Old documents filled the shelves. And on the desk sat a single object, a wooden box, the same type of box as the one she had discovered at Ashcombe. Evelyn stepped closer. Then she heard a voice behind her. "I wondered how long it would take before you found it." She turned. The Duke of Blackmere stood in the doorway. His expression was unreadable. But for the first time since she arrived, Evelyn saw something stronger than coldness. Fear. Not fear of her. Fear of what she was about to discover. And as the Duke closed the door behind him, Evelyn understood that the secret connecting Ashcombe and Blackmere was not buried in the past. It was still alive, and both families had been protecting it. Evelyn did not step back. The old version of herself might have. The daughter who had stood silently at Ashcombe Manor while decisions were made above her head. The young woman who had accepted that powerful people possessed the right to speak, and everyone else possessed the duty to listen. But that woman had been left behind on the road between Ashcombe and Blackmere. Now she stood in a locked room with the Duke of Blackmere watching her, and she understood something clearly. He was not angry because she had entered. He was afraid because she had reached the place he had spent years protecting. "You knew this room existed," she said. The Duke closed the door. "Yes. And you knew someone would send me here." His silence was answer enough. Evelyn looked toward the wooden box on the desk. "Then why allow it?" The Duke walked closer but stopped before the desk. "Because I needed to know whether you would find it." The words surprised her. Not because they were mysterious, because they were honest. "You tested me." "No." His voice remained calm. "I observed you. That was a distinction only a man accustomed to control would make." Evelyn studied him. "And what did you discover?" The Duke looked at the box. "That you are not like the women who came before you." A strange feeling passed through her. Not pride, not satisfaction, something more complicated. Because she realized he was not speaking of beauty, manners, or obedience. He was speaking of resistance. "The rule about your study," she said, "was never about protecting your privacy." The Duke did not answer immediately. Outside rain struck the windows of the east wing. The sound filled the silence between them. Finally he said, "My father believed that family loyalty meant protecting a name at any cost." Evelyn looked at him. "And yours?" "My father taught me the same lesson." The Duke's expression remained controlled, but his voice changed. "Then I learned what that cost." He removed a key from his pocket and placed it beside the wooden box. A small movement, but Evelyn understood its importance. He was giving her access. Not surrendering, but trusting. Inside the box were papers, several letters tied with faded ribbon, an account book, and a sealed document bearing the Ashcombe family mark. Evelyn reached for it. The Duke stopped her. "Before you read that, you should know something." She looked at him. "What?" "Your father did not arrange your marriage to me because he wanted to secure your future." The words landed heavily. Evelyn slowly lowered her hand. "Then why?" "Because he believed you would need protection from the people closest to you." The room seemed to grow colder. "My father knew. He knew enough." "Enough to fear Lady Euphemia." The Duke looked away. "Enough to know that if he openly accused her, the evidence would disappear before anyone could examine it." Evelyn thought of the missing papers, the altered accounts, the locked box, the careful silence. Then she understood the cruelty of the situation. Her father had known she was in danger, but he had been too weak to fight directly. And after his death, the only protection he could leave her was an arrangement with a man she had never met. A marriage, not a romantic promise. A shield. "You let me believe you were part of this." The Duke's eyes returned to hers. "I allowed you to believe what was safest." "That is not the same thing." Evelyn felt anger rise. Perhaps not, but it still left me powerless. The Duke accepted the accusation. Yes, the answer was so simple that it unsettled her. He did not defend himself. He did not claim he had done everything correctly. For a moment he seemed less like the coldest Duke in England and more like a man who had spent years carrying the consequences of other people's mistakes. Evelyn untied the ribbon. The first letter was from her father. The date was written months before his death. "My dear Evelyn, if you are reading this, then I have failed to protect you in the way a father should." She stopped. Her eyes moved across the page. The next lines made her breath catch. "I trusted the wrong people with the management of Ashcombe. I believed kindness would prevent betrayal. I was mistaken." Her fingers tightened around the paper. The letter continued. "The person who has caused the greatest damage is not acting alone. There is another agreement, hidden beneath the accounts. Find the solicitor who prepared the original documents. He knows the truth of what was changed." A solicitor. Another witness. Another missing piece. Evelyn looked at the Duke. "You knew about this letter." "Yes. Why did you not give it to me?" "Because the person who altered those documents was watching every movement connected to Ashcombe. And if I had revealed everything too soon, they would have known you were searching. Evelyn wanted to argue. She wanted to tell him that keeping secrets was exactly what had caused her suffering. But then she remembered something. The broken seal on his letter. The warning from Mr. Whitmore. The fear in Lady Euphemia's face. The danger had followed her, not begun with her. Before she could speak, footsteps sounded outside the room. The Duke immediately extinguished the candle. The darkness came quickly. Evelyn stood still. Someone was approaching. Not a servant walking casually. Someone moving carefully. The door handle shifted. Once, twice. The Duke stood between Evelyn and the entrance. Then the footsteps stopped. A folded envelope slid beneath the door. Neither of them moved until the corridor became silent again. The Duke retrieved it. The seal was broken. His expression changed as he read the contents. "What does it say?" Evelyn asked. He looked at her. For the first time there was no distance between them, only urgency. "It says Lady Euphemia did not come to Blackmere to confront you. She came because someone has discovered the documents are missing." Evelyn looked back at the wooden box. The truth had been hidden for years, but now someone was afraid enough to make mistakes, and mistakes were often the first sign that power was beginning to weaken. The Duke folded the letter. "Tomorrow," he said, "you must attend the winter gathering at Blackmere." Evelyn frowned. "A social event?" "No. A battlefield. Because the same people who laughed when you were sent away from Ashcombe will be there, and this time they will believe you have no power." Evelyn looked at the documents in her hand, then at the locked door, then at the Duke. For the first time she understood the reason behind the marriage everyone had called a cold arrangement. It had never been created to make her obedient. It had been created to place her exactly where she needed to be when the truth finally emerged. But neither Evelyn nor the Duke knew yet that Lady Euphemia had one final move planned before the gathering began. A move that would make the entire society believe Evelyn Ashcombe had broken the one rule no bride of Blackmere had ever dared break. The morning of the winter gathering arrived beneath a sky the color of iron. Blackmere Manor had changed. Not because the walls were different, not because the servants moved differently, because for the first time since Evelyn arrived, the house seemed to be preparing for a battle rather than a celebration. The ballroom was filled with guests from neighboring estates, members of old families and people who had spent years believing they understood the order of society. Among them stood Lady Euphemia. She greeted everyone with perfect composure. That was what made Evelyn cautious. A woman who had been defeated did not enter a room looking that calm. She entered looking for another weapon. Evelyn stood beside the Duke as guests approached. The same people who had laughed at Ashcombe Manor now offered polite smiles and respectful greetings. But she saw what they were trying not to show. Curiosity. They wanted to know whether the marriage had broken her. They wanted to know whether the cold Duke of Blackmere had turned another woman into a silent shadow. Lady Euphemia understood this. That was why she chose the moment carefully. As the musicians prepared to begin, she stepped forward with a small document in her hand. "My friends," she said, "I believe there is a matter of honor that must be addressed." The room quieted. Evelyn felt the shift immediately. This was not an announcement. It was a performance. Lady Euphemia looked toward her. "I had hoped this would remain private. But certain actions cannot be ignored when they affect the reputation of an entire family." A whisper moved through the room. The Duke's expression hardened. "What are you suggesting?" Lady Euphemia lowered her eyes as though reluctant to speak. "Only the truth, Your Grace." She lifted the paper. "A record from Blackmere's private study has been removed without permission." Silence followed. Then several guests looked toward Evelyn. The accusation did not need to be spoken directly. Everyone understood. She had broken the rule, the one rule the Duke had given her. Do not enter his private study. Evelyn felt the old familiar sensation return, the feeling of standing before a room where everyone had already decided the answer. At Ashcombe they had believed she was difficult. Now they wanted to believe she was dishonest. But this time she was not alone. The Duke stepped forward. "You entered my study." It was not a question. Evelyn met his eyes. "Yes." A murmur passed through the ballroom. Lady Euphemia looked satisfied. But the Duke did not turn away from Evelyn. And that was the first sign that the plan was not unfolding as expected. "Why?" he asked. Evelyn looked around the room. "Because someone hid the truth there." The guests reacted with surprise. Lady Euphemia immediately spoke. A convenient explanation. "No." Evelyn's voice remained calm. "A necessary one." She reached into her gown and removed the document from the east wing. The room fell silent. This was the paper my father left behind, the one proving that agreements concerning Ashcombe were altered after his illness began. Lady Euphemia's confidence disappeared for the briefest moment, but Evelyn saw it. So did the Duke. The document was not the final proof. It was the beginning. And before anyone could challenge its authenticity, the doors of the ballroom opened. An elderly gentleman entered carrying a worn leather case. Mr. Whitmore stepped forward. "My lady." The man removed his hat. "I believe you have been searching for me." Evelyn recognized him from the name written in her father's letter. The original solicitor, the witness who had disappeared. The room that had expected Evelyn to be shamed now waited for someone else to speak. The gentleman looked toward Lady Euphemia. "I was instructed many years ago to remain silent." He paused. But silence protects the guilty only until someone is brave enough to ask why it was required. Lady Euphemia took a step back. For the first time, the woman who had controlled Ashcombe Manor appeared uncertain. Evelyn looked toward the Duke. He gave the smallest nod. Not an order, not permission, trust. And she understood then that breaking the Duke's rule had never been the true danger. The danger was allowing others to decide what she was allowed to know. The solicitor opened his case. Inside were the records that would reveal how Ashcombe's fortune had been redirected, who had signed the altered agreements, and why Lady Euphemia had been so desperate to send Evelyn away. Before the night ended, the society that once watched Evelyn fall would have to witness something far more uncomfortable. They would have to watch her stand.